Yo, what's going on, Titan Clan? It is your boy King Titan X here, back with another video, and unfortunately I do have a cold, which may affect the sound quality of the video, but that's besides the point. Basically, like, this has been a long awaited what if, and I would like to thank Neptune for helping me, like, with planning out the script. I will leave the link to their channel in the description. And another thing, like, if you guys are interested in working with them, they're actually working on their own what if by the name of What If Data Live and DXD Fused. So if you're interested, hit them up. They're basically looking for a co-writer and an editor. They will give more details in the DMs. Anyways, let's roll that intro. I should tell you guys from right now, like, this beginning part is gonna be like full spoilers if you don't read the Dragon Ball Super manga. But if you guys just don't care, it is what it is.
It was a mighty battle. Stories will be told about this battle for ages. It was Beerus fighting the two full-blooded Saiyans, Goku and Vegeta. They fought for countless hours, all three at their full power. Goku and Ultra Instinct, Vegeta and Ultra Ego. Beerus had his full strength that lasted hours, with the three landing blows on each other. Goku managed to dodge most of Beerus's attacks, but the ones that did collide with the silver-haired Saiyan managed to do a great deal of damage to him. Goku managed to land most of the blows though. Vegeta was the exact opposite though. His hair was purple and several of Beerus's attacks managed to hit him. Despite that, the Saiyan only seemed to get stronger. Beerus managed to avoid most of Vegeta's attacks, but the ones that landed heavily winded him. The two were working in unison, and Beerus loved every moment of it, even when he was eventually put down by the two. He knew this day would come, he just never knew when. It was his desire to die in battle though, and it was so fitting to die by the hands of what he saw as honorable opponents. People he had seen grow and develop over the years in power and skill. What more could a cat wish for, to be honest?
Goku held Beerus's dead body in his hands. He was contemplating wishing him back to life, but Vegeta was the one to tell him not to do so. Goku only saw fit that he report to the Zenos though about the news. He pulled out the button the first other two gave to him and pressed it, teleporting himself and the dead body of Beerus over to their palace. The two Zenos looked on in awe, seeing how strong Goku had gotten and the results of his battle against the god of destruction. Now that Beerus was dead, they didn't need to replace him soon. Goku requested something from the Zenos though. Before searching for a worthy successor, Goku wanted to know if they could do something special for Beerus. Perhaps reincarnate him, put him in a new body with his memories intact so that he could have a chance at life once again, but be able to do things differently. It sounded like a simple enough task for them, so with a snap of their fingers, Beerus's body vanished from Goku's arms. Just like that, the destroyer was no more, but now there was a new being with a new story. Whatever Beerus decided to do was no longer any of their concern. Beerus was now no longer the god of destruction for Universe 7. Instead, what ended up happening was that he had awakened into a new body with stubby human fingers. He looked at his legs and saw they were similar as well. He couldn't believe this. He had been reborn into a human baby's body. This was embarrassing in his opinion. The last thing he remembered experiencing was getting hit by a combo attack from Goku and Vegeta, piercing through his heart. He could not compete against them any longer, and that was when the light in his eyes dissipated. He had a feeling Goku had something to do with his reincarnation, though. The man was always a big softy after all. He supposed he had to make the best of his new living arrangements. He hoped he still had his power, though. Over the years he trained in order to get this weak human body as strong as possible. His new name was Issei apparently, and his parents were rather annoying. By the time he was 10 years old, he learned how to harness some of his destroyer power once again. By the age of 12, he had learned how to manipulate his ki in various ways once again. To celebrate his progress, he dyed his hair purple. It was his way of giving respect back to his old life. Although his parents seemed to be outraged at the fact he did such a thing, Issei hardly cared. If he could, he would have just erased them from existence, but he did not feel like explaining what happened to the police of this earth and having to fend for himself if he ever managed to tell a decent enough lie for them to believe. Instead, he just showed his dominance by taking them both down in a fight. It was almost pitiful how weak they were in comparison to him. He craved something more. They tried disciplining him a couple of more times, but quickly learned it would be better to just let him do whatever he wanted if they cared for their own well-being. After all, each and every time they tried to take up the role of functioning parents, he would show them how the roles worked in this household. He was at the top, being the strongest, and therefore they listened to him, not the other way around. Even the schools learned this as well. More often than not, people would usually leave him alone, but from time to time there would be that one person that did not get the memo. They would try to mess with him, and they would deeply regret it as he would pummel them to the ground. The schools tried to discipline him multiple times, but gave up when they found out that even his parents stopped trying a long time ago, considering his absurd amount of strength. Issei preferred that, since he was a pretty well-behaved child. Beyond that, some could say that he was spoiled, since he would get whatever he wanted from both the school and his parents, but none would be willing to ever say it to his face if they knew what he was capable of. By the time he was in high school, Issei had been given a nickname by many people. He was referred to as the Sleeping Demon. The sleeping part was, well, due to how he would take naps during some of the lessons his teachers taught, but he knew there would be no consequences from it. The teachers were too afraid of him to bother him while he was sleeping unless the bell rang, informing everyone of the fact they needed to move on to their next class or that school was over with. The demon part was obvious, considering how violent he could be if someone ever got on his bad side. His parents ended up enrolling him into the prestigious Kuo Academy, a former all-girls school, in hopes of that being the one thing that could change him. Maybe being around more estrogen would make him slightly kinder. The results were, pretty decent, since they did not really receive as many calls about his behavior, but that was mainly because of the fact nobody really bothered him that much. More often than not, it was just Issei strengthening his body, practicing his skills His skills were key, and sleeping in class. Well, that and eating the delicacies of the world. The school, surprisingly, had quite amazing food. Issei was satisfied for the most part. There were still no strong opponents for him to fight against, but he could tell there was more to this place than it appeared. He could sense that there were higher power levels, none that were as high as his own, but some that would dwarf the strength of an average human. They were tainted as well. He wanted to know more about these people. He was eventually planning on approaching them, but he usually stuffed his face for food too much. One day, one of these people with unusual tainted energy approached him. It was practically his lucky day since he wanted to know more about them for the longest, and here was his chance. She seemed normal for the most part while he walked her to her classes. She even asked him on a date. Afterward, he accepted, and the two had some fun at an arcade for their date. Their dinner was pretty much hamburgers and fries. It was an enjoyable date, the first one Issei had ever been on, but the girl decided to ask him a strange question. Would he die for her? He immediately said no, but it didn't seem to faze her. Instead, she practically went through a metamorphosis, even changing her manner of speech and personality. She was in a completely different outfit, mainly all black, and she was sporting black wings too. He had studied a bit of mythology to understand that this was pretty much the depiction of what a fallen angel was. She mocked him for a bit and was in the middle of forming a light spear. He got sick of her talking though and decided to simply erase her by sending a ball of Hakai energy at her, consuming Rainier. His ears perked up when he heard the sound of footsteps. Someone was watching. He charged another ball of Hakai energy in order to get rid of any and all evidence here. He was about to throw it at the person, but paused when he saw who it was. Rias charged up her own attack to counter Issei's own in case he struck, but the boy paused when he saw her. He lowered his attack. "Tell me, Rias, what exactly are you?" Issei asked. "Funny, I had the same question for you, but if you must know, well, I am a devil, specifically part of the House of Gremory, and I am the heiress to said clan." A devil. This world just gets more and more interesting. Well, I was once known as the god of destruction, specifically the one known as Beerus of Universe 7, but I was reincarnated into what you know as Issei, the Red Dragon Emperor. What's your business here? Rias didn't really believe most of what Issei said, but her eyes widened when she heard that he was the Red Dragon Emperor. This was just what she needed in order to get out to the marriage with Riser. "I came in case that fallen angel was too much for you and you needed healing. It seems that you had it handled pretty well enough, though I should inform you of the fact that there are more who may come after you. That's why you should join my peerage so that we can protect you and train you to become strong. If there are more like that fallen angel, then it sounds like they just be target practice for me." Rias blinked for a second. She wasn't expecting that sort of answer from him. She supposed she would have to play to the desires of most men in this world, with that being lust. She put on a flirtatious act for Issei, but all this seemed to do was annoy the purple-haired boy. Rias was shocked. This usually worked for most guys, so why wasn't it working on him? Issei walked over to Rias soon after. She thought that it was actually beginning to work and figured that it just took a little longer than others due to his more aggressive nature. They all came around though. Well, she wasn't completely wrong, but something else happened instead of what she was predicting. Originally, she believed that he would fall for her charms and be willing to become her servant, but instead, he grabbed her by the throat. A purple glow began to flash from the hand covering Rias's throat, and a couple of seconds later, he let go to reveal that a seal formed around said area. Issei admitted to Rias having a bit of a charm to her, but nothing that he couldn't handle. The seal he created for her essentially turned her into his pawn, and she would learn to obey her new lord. His first command was for her to kneel. She wanted to refuse, but was forced to do so thanks to the seal electrocuting her for her insubordination. 1 week was all it took to break Rias. At school, she seemed to act pretty similar to how she did before, but that was only when she wasn't with Issei. After school, she would be found with Issei and even head home with him from time to time. It was usually her training with Issei in order to become stronger herself and to entertain her ruler. On the weekend, she would often be found acting as the maid of Issei's household, listening to each and every one of Issei's commands. 2 weeks in, and the members of Rias's peerage could tell something was wrong. Kiba was the first to confront Issei and attempt to even fight him in order to free his master from his control, only to be put down as well. He didn't beat Kiba too brutally though, just enough to let him know the difference in strength. Not only that, but this blonde interested him. If he trained this kid, maybe he could serve as someone worthy of challenging him later on in the years. Give him an actual good fight. Akano and Konoko were also turned rather, well, submissive rather quickly by Issei, showing just how large the gap was between the three of them. Akano ended up becoming a maid for the Hyodo household as well, although she was throughout the week, unlike Rias, who was only for the weekends. That was just to break her in though. By the end of the month, she and Rias ended up working as maids pretty much every day after school. Konoko was an interesting story. Issei could tell that this girl held a tremendous amount of potential, but she was holding it back for some reason. Each time they sparred, he could feel her holding back her punches, even though she didn't want to. Issei forced her to release her full power against him. She unleashed her Nico strength on Issei, but even after that, it had little effect on him. He was just happy to have the girl stop holding back. She had become his new pet in a sense, and he would make this pet cat of his into a jaguar, the strongest cat. Over time, she began to act more wild in her fighting style and mannerisms, with the only one really taming her to an extent being Issei. Even then, he only got involved on rare occasions with how she acted. Issei would have been too occupied training Rias's peerage to even bother really going exploring much. Unfortunately, he never met Asya though, and the fallen angels were able to extract his sacred gear. Since Rainier wasn't there to claim it, Kala Warner was the one to gain the ability. With all that had happened, Rias had forsaken her engagement with the one known as Riser. Grapey had even caught Rias and Issei in the act one time, but it was too late for her to do anything. She didn't even say anything to the two. Instead, she left to inform Sir Zex and Riser of the news. While at the Occult Research Club one day, a magical circle appeared before the group. Rias recognized who the magical portal belonged to, but she was surprised to see Riser standing next to Graphia. He had an angered look on his face. He directed his attention to Issei and roared at him. You were the one to dare defile my dearest Rias. How dare you! He walked over to Issei and tried to grab him by the collar, but Issei casually slapped the blonde's hand away. Don't touch me. Graphia informed everyone in the room about Rias' engagement to Riser. She didn't blame Issei for not knowing, but she would have never predicted for Rias to have become someone else's, servant, let alone a servant to a mere human, although this one seemed to have some special qualities to himself. She wanted to know more about him one day, but for now she had to inform Issei of the fact he needed to relinquish his control over Rias. I have no intention of doing so, Issei stated. Why, you little... Graphia stopped the fight from breaking out, though, by stating that Issei could fight for Rias by participating in a rating game against Riser Phoenix. They could have a month to prepare, but Issei needed no such thing. He and Rias' peerage had been training for a while together after all. As far as he was concerned, they could start immediately and get it over with. Graphia was surprised to hear such confidence coming from Issei, but if he insisted, then she had no right to keep him waiting. They set up preparations for him to have the rating game a couple of days after the declaration. Once the day had arrived, Riser was filled with fury seeing Issei's face. This boy had mocked him one too many times the last time they met, and he planned on making sure he would pay. Unfortunately, that's not how things played out at all. Issei sped through all of Riser's army, eliminating almost all of them. The only one he really had his attention focused on was Riser. He grabbed the bastard son of the Phoenix clan by the head and slammed him down to the ground. He bled profusely, only to heal not too long after. This intrigued Issei. He hadn't met that many people who could regenerate. He wanted to test something out. What was stronger, Riser's healing or Issei's Hakai? He threw Riser into several buildings before grabbing him by the leg and flinging him into the air. He slammed him back down to the ground not too long after. He had his foot over Riser's chest. Riser was still capable of healing from Issei's onslaught. The younger boy smirked seeing this. He lifted up one hand and pointed it towards Riser's face. Hakai. Issei had limited it down to only one of Riser's arms instead of his whole body. This was him showing mercy to the devil who dared to challenge him and refused to learn his place. Riser screamed as he saw his right arm dissipate. The worst part about all of it, though, was the fact it wasn't healing. What was the meaning of this? Issei kicked Riser in the head, completely knocking him out. He had single-handedly won the whole other rating game, a whole peerage against one man who wasn't even a devil yet. What made the people fear Issei even more at this moment was what happened to Riser. Issei completely erased his arm from existence, seemingly. The boy never encountered any situation where his healing flames couldn't bring him back to 100% capacity. Even lost limbs were never an issue for him until today. Sir Zex recognized that sort of power Issei used that day on Riser. He used the word Hakai. The only beings who could use such a strong ability were gone to destruction. Not even the Gremory family could use destruction energy to such an extent. If anything, the most they could really call the destruction energy in comparison to the Hakai was a simple mediocre imitation. He brought Rias in for questioning about this Issei boy, and what he heard from her left him sweating. The boy was the reincarnation of a god of destruction and the Red Dragon Emperor. So far, he had proved to believe that the first part was true, but if the boy showed evidence of also being the Red Dragon Emperor, he would be a monster among men. He had to be careful addressing him. He offered Issei the chance of becoming a devil himself in order to become even stronger than he already was and have the opportunity to form his own peerage, proper peerage, and even be given a high ranking from the get-go. Those with high rankings in the devil faction received special treatment. Money wouldn't be an issue for him any longer. People would address him with more respect. There were more prigs with being known as a high-ranking devil, but Issei would find that in time. Issei accepted the offer, and he was reincarnated into a devil. A king piece was inserted into Issei's body, and Sir Zex bowed his head. As a king now, Beerus had to seek for worthy peerage members. The first thing he ended up doing was requesting to look through Riser Phoenix's peerage in case there were any interesting people within there. Sir Zex complied, showing him a list of names and the abilities of said members. Issei paused when he saw Rival Phoenix. He figured that she was probably related to Riser Phoenix, and if that were the case, well, she probably had similar abilities to him. He wanted her in his peerage, especially after looking at her abilities. Of course, sir, Sir Zex replied. Oh, and what can that silver-haired mistress do? What was her name again? Grapey, I believe it was. Zex's heart began to race. What was he implying? Come on now, don't be shy. Also, don't lie to me. I don't like liars, Issei informed. Sir Zex gulped. She's capable of matching me in power. She's stated to be the strongest queen. I'll take her as well. Sir Zex jumped to his knees and began to beg Issei not to take her. She was his wife, and they even had a son together. She'd been with him since forever, and he couldn't imagine losing her. Issei showed zero compassion on his face though. You can keep the kid, but say goodbye to Gravia. Either that, or I take your position of power as well. I'm sure you wouldn't want that though, so choose wisely, Sir Zex Lucifer. I'm giving you 24 hours to come to a decision. Until then, I'll be at my home in the human realm. 16 hours later, two magical circles formed in Issei's room. Two females arrived from their respective circles, one with blonde hair and the other with silver hair. The one with silver hair had a bitter look on her face, and she refused to look at Issei. The one with blonde hair seemed nervous. Issei wasn't too worried though. They would learn how to address him in time. Nothing interesting would have really developed for Issei beyond that. He would have made the two new arrivals into maids to help Rias and Akino whenever they weren't sparring. He could not afford for his peerage members to be weak after all. Although Gravia didn't like Issei all that much at first for taking her away from Sir Zex, she grew accustomed to his mannerisms. Her fondness for her former lover began to vanish in time as well. She was still allowed to see her son from time to time though. Irina and Zenobia would have met with Rias's peerage one day though, and informed them of how They were searching for the culprit who stole Excalibur. Kiba's ears would have perked up hearing this. He wanted to help in this investigation, claiming that he was strong enough to help and that he had his own connection to Excalibur, although it wasn't pleasant. The two girls heard this and wanted to reject his offer until they heard him request a duel in order to show how strong he was. They accepted only to show him that he was biting off more than he could chew. He had been sparring with the reincarnate of a god of destruction for months though now, so fighting these two girls was practically nothing in his eyes. He easily blitzed them and his strikes were enough to throw them back. There was no blocking his attacks regardless of how simple some were. To them it was more than it really was. They agreed to having him tag along and they managed to find out who the culprits were. It just turned out that there was more to it than they originally thought. Freed was an easy enough person to fight off, but he wasn't the only one behind the theft of Excalibur. He was only just the beginning. Another being by the name of Kokobeel appeared not too many days after Freed and with an extremely injured Irina. She was barely breathing at this point. They went into the field in order to fight the rogue fallen angel leader. They did their best in order to fight the being, but struggled to do so while still protecting the school. Kiba was strong, but he was still weak to light attacks. It didn't tell him that Freed was there once again, but this time with another fallen angel wearing a red coat, who could heal from pretty much anything he threw at her. Zenobia wasn't of much help in this case either. Rias and Akino attacked the fallen angels as well. They were capable of causing enough damage to paralyze Kyle Warner, but Kokobeel, although injured, kept going, stating that their attacks tickled him. He was surprised to find that the hero of the Grimmery clan wasn't just a brat, considering the rumors of how she was taken up by some human turned devil, but even then she was still 1,000 years too early to be challenging him. He backhanded her into the ground and headbutted Akino. He was about to kill them, but Issei appeared in front of him. He was annoyed. He grabbed the fallen angel's arm and twisted it. He had his palm facing toward Kokobeel, surprising them. The kid came out of nowhere, and why was this kid so strong? He couldn't get out of their hold. Right when Valley Lucifer arrived in order to put an end to Kokobeel, he instead witnessed something else in the form of Issei performing a technique similar to his own existence erasure. To an extent, the purple-haired boy simply said the word Hikai, and that was enough to cause Kokobeel's existence to dissipate into nothing. Valley left the area right after seeing that his presence wasn't needed. Kokobeel was no longer a threat after all. He triggered something though, that being the peace treaty between the three factions. During the preparation for the peace treaty though, Zenobia was kicked out of the church for finding out from Kokobeel that their god was dead. Kylo Warner was taken by Issei though, and she had the sacred gear she stole from Asya extracted. She didn't need it after all. Issei knew Irina from when he was younger, although he thought she was a boy back then. He had Ravel heal the girl and placed a knight chess piece in her. She seemed to have potential after all. The fact she was still breathing after being beaten so severely by Kokobeel left him to believe she could be someone worth his time. Irina, finding out that she was reincarnated into a devil, wanted to scream. There was no other way to repent besides seppuku, or seppuku. She was electrocuted when she tried to do so, though. Issei figured she would have done this after all. He invested quite a bit in her, so it would have been a waste for her to die now. Zenobia was also recruited into Issei's peerage not too long after Irina, once she had gathered herself back together. By the time the peace treaty was formed, Issei officially had 4 strong members added to his peerage. He was wondering who he would give the sacred gear he took from Calawarner to, though. He originally planned on giving it to Rabel, but it seemed to be a bit redundant with how great her healing capabilities already were. While at the peace treaty, Issei ended up meeting the 3 faction leaders. The White Dragon Emperor and the fallen angel leader Azazel was the one to really entice him with the benefits of having peace between the factions. Sir Zek simply looked down throughout the meeting between the faction leaders since he didn't want to look at what he lost. It was going with little to no issues until a woman appeared in front of them, declaring war and freezing several other people there in place. Those were pretty much party tricks in Issei's eyes. The girl introduced herself as Katarina Leviathan, and that she, along with several members of the old Satan faction, would be taking back what rightfully belonged to them. She glared daggers at Serapha Leviathan. Issei decided to let it play out for a little bit in order to see if this would actually pique his interest. This girl was pretty weak in his eyes though, so he gave her 5 minutes. 5 minutes in order to impress him before he just annihilated her. Within those 5 minutes, she revealed that she had built up an entire army of magicians in order to fight off the new Satans and the other faction leaders. She began to fight Azazel, and within the battle he revealed the fact he had created his own sacred gear. Well, that was surprising. Another thing that was interesting was the fact the apparent White Dragon Emperor was now missing. Well, wasn't that just convenient? Issei got bored seeing everyone else fight while he dealt with what felt like ants attacking a lion. These magicians were so pitiful in his eyes that he didn't even find them worthy of being Hakkai'd. Instead, he shot an energy blast at all of them. It was too powerful for them to defend against, although it was really only a fraction of his real power. Issei's attack seemed to leave Katarina shocked. She wasn't expecting for something like this to happen. Issei was vanquishing her army faster than she expected for even the faction leaders. Her momentary distraction left her wide open for Azazel to land a direct hit on her, throwing Katarina to the ground. She was weakened but not for long. She was forced to resort to Opus's snakes in order to have a sudden increase in strength. Once the snakes bit her, Issei could tell something was up with this girl. That sudden increase was unusual. It didn't seem natural at all. He flew over to where she was at in order to examine what she did to herself. He found black veins popping all around her body, and she had a sadistic look on her face. Katarina charged at Issei, but the Dragon Emperor grabbed her by the throat and pinned her to the ground. Even with this surge of energy rampaging throughout her body at the moment, she was no match for Issei. As he stomped down on her windpipe, he raised his hand towards her face and only uttered one word. You all know what it is. Hakkai. That was all he needed in order to completely erase her and end this meaningless war. After that, Issei continued to simply train his peerage members and Rias's own as well, since they were rather connected. So connected, in fact, that Rias was able to get it to where Irina and Zenobia were both able to get enrolled into Cool Academy with a little help from Rias. He also ended up meeting a boy by the name of Gasper, who was the bishop in Rias's peerage. During one of his training sessions though, and the kid had an interesting sacred gear. It reminded him of that one guy from Universe 6. What was his name again? He believed their name was Punch. No, that can't be right. Kick? No, Hit. Yeah, it was Hit. The whole time, manipulation aspect was what interested Issei all throughout their training. He wanted to see just how far he could push Gasper and the others. Beyond that, Issei also slept around. Literally. He didn't really care where he slept. If he wasn't fighting or occupied with stuffing his face, he had little to no interest in anything else, hence why he, slept. The rating games were of no interest to him since they were basically weaklings fighting weaklings. The most he really ever did in terms of participation was having his peerage members fight while he stayed in the back, sleeping. He already had the title of an ultimate class devil after the fight with Katarina anyway, so there wasn't much to really gain from fighting weaklings. He went on a field trip with his class to Kyoto at one point too, but he was mainly there for the food. Sure, there was some sightseeing too, but he really only cared for the delicacies. Everything else was a snooze fest for him. Well, at least that was how it was supposed to go. Instead, he ended up getting ambushed by these yokai, who claimed that he kidnapped some yokai who was apparently their leader. They were small fry though, and Issei was able to easily defeat these guys. He managed to convince them that they had gotten the wrong guy and that he was simply sightseeing, although it was rather boring. The young fox girl, Kunoi was her name, explained their side of the situation to Issei afterward. What ended up happening was that her mother, the leader of the yokai, seemingly vanished one day. They were able to deduce that she was kidnapped, and they were beginning to get a lead on who the culprits were, but they did not necessarily know for certain just yet. When they saw Issei arrive and noticed his magical presence, they kinda jumped the gun with him, believing he was allied with the hero faction. They were hoping that by taking him down, it would give them an even greater lead towards Konoe's mother's whereabouts. They did apologize for their actions, although Issei was still a bit bitter over the assault against him. He looked over to the fox yokai and kneeled down. He could tell that this girl had quite a bit of untapped potential. If she were older, he would have thought about adding her to his peerage, but he wanted to know what the girl's mother was capable of. If she was the leader of this group, she had to be strong after all. Maybe she could give him his first ever good fight since he had been in this world. If not, he could probably vent his frustrations by obliterating those hero faction members. He wasn't able to find these guys by himself though. It was from them trying to pick a fight with his and Rias's peerages that allowed Issei to find out where they were. He was on the other side of the town when he felt Kiba's aura begin to flare up. It seemed as if he was in distress. Then he felt the same for Zenobia and Gasper. He knew something was wrong. He flew over to see just what was going on and saw that they were fighting off Sacred Gear users seemingly. It was the sheer number of Sacred Gear users that was the issue for the group. The one in the middle with black hair and the Chinese outfit seemed to be their leader, just judging by his aura. It was on a whole other level compared to the others. Issei shot down towards the supposed leader at too fast of a pace for them to even ready their weapon. He flung the black-haired leader into one of his men that were in the middle of fighting Kiba. Issei quickly overwhelmed the majority of the hero faction before focusing his attention back on Cao Cao. I will never get used to that name. They were bleeding a bit, but they readied their weapon. He was confident that he'd be able to defeat this monster now. He was only caught off guard at first, that was all. Cao Cao couldn't really comprehend the sheer speed Issei had. He didn't want to believe the purple-haired boy could surpass the strength of his Longinus. He sent blasts of light at Issei, but he either dodged or blocked the attacks with seemingly no injuries. Cao Cao charged at Issei, attempting to stab him, but Issei wasn't amused at his tactics. He was sure that the boy could have been a proficient combatant against almost any other enemy, but Issei was just too strong for his attacks to mean anything. He grabbed the boy's throat and demanded to know where the leader of the yokais was. If Cao Cao gave Issei that bit of information, he would actually consider letting him live. Cao Cao had never experienced what it felt like to be outclassed in every way imaginable until today, and he had never feared for his life as much as today either. He could tell Issei wasn't bluffing either. He informed Issei of her location. He stayed true to his word, but that didn't necessarily mean he would let Cao Cao get away scot-free though. The boy needed to be taught a lesson when it came to messing with the Issei's peerage after all. He would serve as an example for others as well. He summoned his sacred gear for this too. He tapped Cao Cao's shoulder with the tip of one of his fingers and caused it to turn to sand. Cao screamed in agony, but Issei fled the scene, looking for Kanoi's mother. Once he found her, he brought the woman back to her faction and requested a spar against a woman to see how strong she was. Her daughter was quite strong already, so he had a feeling that the mother had to at least be a good amount stronger. Yasaka blushed though and requested that they try a different form of sparring. After their trip to Kyoto was over though, Issei would end up getting a knock on his door, and it turned out to be Kanoi. He was surprised at first until her mother came in as well, informing Issei the fact she wanted to join his peerage from now on, that Kanoi would be having a baby brother or sister in a couple of months, 3 months the latest, and the kid, well, they were Issei's own. And that's pretty much all for like the movie, y'all. Let me know if I should also go into the light novels as well. Comment that down below, and I'll probably even make a poll for it. And yeah, like, it is your boy King Time Next signing out. If you guys like the video, you guys already know what to do. Like, check out a couple other videos and see if you like those as well. If you like those videos, you may as well subscribe. Maybe comment below as well. And if you got any friends who are interested in this sort of content, what you call it, y'all may want to share it to them, like show love to each other, I guess. And yeah, it is your boy King Time Next signing out.